Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really getting into the heart of things, exploring love itself.
We are, and our guide is Stendhal, Marie-Henri Val, really.
Yeah,
His book On Love.
exactly. We're looking at this translated version, packed with his ideas, stories. It's quite a text.
It really is, and our goal, I guess, is to sort of pull out his key insights on this, well, massive topic, see what still hits home today.
Right. So On Love, it came out, what, early 19th century?
Yeah, originally in French,
Mm-hmm.
and Stendhal himself seemed, almost a bit nervous about it.
How so?
He added loads of preface material, almost apologizing, framing it as this foreigner in
Yeah.
the literary world.
Interesting. And he uses pseudonyms too, right? Like Lissiso
He
Visconti.
does. And he mixes real people, like his old boss, General Toulet,
Yeah.
with fictional characters. It blurs the lines from the start.
Okay, so let's unpack that. This isn't a typical romance novel he's writing.
Not at all. He explicitly says he wants to explain these curious feelings of love simply, almost mathematically.
Mathematically,
Or-
love.
Yeah, like it's a complex geometric figure that, already exists and just needs mapping out.
But there's a catch, isn't there?
Uh-huh. He insists you, the reader, kind of need to have experienced love to really get what he's talking about.
Right, like describing color to someone who can't see.
Exactly that. He knew it was tough. He compares love to the Milky Way.
The Milky Way.
Yeah, it looks like one thing, but it's actually countless tiny, separate feelings, hard to distinguish up close.
And he felt others writing about love missed the mark.
He did. Even the big ones, like Rousseau's Nouvelle Heloise or Provost's Men en Lascaux, popular novels, but he felt they often skipped the core psychological bits he was after.
Why did he think that happened? Especially in France.
Vanity. And the fear of looking foolish. He argued that French society, with its focus on appearances, just couldn't handle a truly deep, honest look at love.
So his book was meant to provide some, I guess, clarity, especially for people maybe let down by love.
That seems to be the hope, but it wasn't exactly a bestseller. Famously, it sold something like 17 copies between 1822 and 1833.
Wow, 17. Why so few?
Well, partly the style, he admits. And he introduced these new terms, like his big one, crystallization.
Ah, crystallization. Let's talk about that. What did he mean?
It's absolutely key. It's the mental process, basically, where you start decorating the person you're falling for with all sorts of imagined perfections.
So like projecting fantasies onto them.
Exactly. You weave these ideas, these ideals around them, and you start believing they're true. He uses this analogy.
The salt mines.
Salt mines of Salzburg, yeah. You throw in a beer branch, and over time, it gets completely covered in these glittering salt crystals.
And our minds do that to the person we love.
That's Stendhal's idea. We mentally crystallize them, covering the ordinary branch, so to speak, with dazzling qualities. It's his explanation for seeing someone through rose-tinted glasses.
Okay, that makes sense. So how does he think this whole process, how love actually starts?
Well, he suggests it can begin quite subtly. Even just a flicker of surprise, a bit of faint hope, in someone who was maybe indifferent before.
Like his example of the girl in the lonely castle.
Right. Living this isolated life, a little admiration sparks, then love begins, and crystallization kicks in, almost as a diversion initially.
Just something to occupy the mind.
Intentionally, yeah. He points to surprise and hope being powerful triggers, especially, he notes, in a 16-year-old who has this sort of thirst for love and sadness.
Suggesting a kind of readiness. Not too picky at first.
Maybe a certain openness. He also mentions a possible physical side, a mad impulse, rush of blood to the brain, a neurological thing almost.
Oh, a physical change.
Yeah, he sees it as this quite extravagant shift happening in the brain when love first hits.
And the environment matters too, doesn't it? Where love is likely to grow.
Oh, definitely. He thought that kind of irksome solitude broken up by exciting social events like balls was perfect ground.
Fertile ground for love. Clever mothers apparently knew this.
So he suggests. But he contrasts this with, say, the very busy, fashionable world of the old French court.
Right. Too much going on, no time for...
For the solitude needed for that crystallization to really take hold. Even if the social nuances there could spark initial admiration.
It makes you wonder about today, doesn't it? Our world is so connected, solitude feels rare.
That's a great point. Is that constant connection maybe hindering that deep imaginative crystallization process Stendhal described?
Could be. He definitely stresses the mind's role, its internal work.
And how when life is tough or gloomy, the mind might actually flee into crystallization as a kind of escape.
Seeking solace in that idealization.
Exactly. He also talks about infatuation.
What's his take on that?
He sees it often in the very curious or maybe people whose passions have cooled calls, that a fatal symptom,
Hmm.
interestingly, and young guys just entering society.
So, in those cases, people project charm before there's a real connection.
Pretty much. Imaginary charm first, real feelings maybe later, or maybe not at all. He gives that quick example, the woman fixated on Fendorf, then poof, interest gone. Fleeting.
Right. Then there's that weird chapter, Voyage in an Unknown Land.
Ah, yes. The one about orange trees in Italy and Spain.
He tells Northerners to just skip it.
He does. Calls it an obscure dissertation. Says he just wanted to record some observations from the land of the orange tree, even if it seemed unbelievable back home. It's a bit of a curveball.
Definitely a detour. Maybe it's about perspective. Or just him being thorough.
Could be either.
Her.
Or just Stendhal being Stendhal. Certainly shows him recording things as he saw them. Anyway, after How Love Starts.
Right. He looks at the dynamics, what happens between people.
And he points out this imbalance, often, in those key moments.
Imbalance. How?
He says the more practical person, the prosaic soul, often gains more.
Because the sensitive one is overwhelmed.
Exactly. Overwhelmed by their own feelings, they kind of miss opportunities, can't express themselves well. Fear of failure can silence them.
Especially under the gaze of the beloved. Unlike the vulgar being, who might be more calculating.
Right. The gentle soul ends up relying on the other's charity, he says, and feels bad if they push too hard.
He also mentions how awkward trying to express deep feelings can be.
Yeah, like we try too hard, maybe influenced by novels, instead of just letting natural emotions show.
He tells that little story, doesn't he? The woman cutting back visits with her friend.
Causing him huge distress.
Yeah.
But then Stendhal adds that little bit of hope.
That persisting might work if the guy was liked initially.
Yeah, suggesting that even missteps aren't always fatal in love. It's unpredictable.
Okay, shifting gears. What about his views on men and women specifically?
Well, he notes women tend to be only partly frank. He puts this down to feminine pride and modesty.
Not just being fickle, like some might think.
No, he warns against that mistake, just seeing women as more generous but changeable men. He says pride and modesty are distinct, powerful influences.
He gives examples, right? Like Pia.
Yes, the woman suffering silently under her jealous husband, showing incredible restraint, pride.
Contrasted with that darker story from Piedmont. Silent, deadly jealousy.
Yeah, highlighting these intense, often unspoken dynamics driven by pride.
And that point about military life. Handling a woman's complaints gracefully.
Could be mistaken for weakness, yeah. He also contrasts male and female courage.
How so?
Women's courage, he thinks, is often driven by affection or duty, and has a kind of reserve, a resilience men might lack in battle.
And they find pleasure in matching men's firmness in danger.
Yeah, overcoming fear that way. He's really observing the interplay of vanity, emotion, social roles.
Even saying harshness from a loved one feels different than flattery from others.
Right. Shows the depth of investment, doesn't it?
Definitely. Now, what about temperament and nationality? He gets into that too.
Oh, yeah. He thinks love takes on a different color based on 6 temperaments.
6.
Sanguine, which he links to the French, choleric for the Spanish, melancholy for Germans, phlegmatic for Dutch, nervous like Voltaire, and athletic like Milo of Croton.
That's quite a list. In national traits.
French driven by vanity, Italians by passion, Germans by imagination. Those are his big 3 distinctions.
He uses stories to illustrate, right? The German officers.
Uh-huh. Ambition trumping friendship. Contrasted with this apothecary's view of German love and that Provençal courtly love tale.
William of Cabstang,
Oh.
showing love tested by social rules.
Exactly. Then he shifts focus again, quite dramatically, to Arabian ideals.
From Bedouin culture, what did he see there?
Equality between lovers, absolute faithfulness, generosity is sacred. All this in a context of, danger and solitude.
He compares it favorably to Europe sometimes.
He suggests the East might see Europeans as, barbarians regarding love and home life, praising Arab loyalty and simplicity.
But he notes the influence of Mohammedanism too.
Yeah, possibly making love less overt. But he still tells stories of deep tenderness, even death from love among Arabs.
So different views, love as a sweet death versus weakness.
Precisely. And that touching story of the Muslim man loving the Christian woman despite everything really shows the cultural spectrum he's trying to capture.
Okay, let's talk education and society. What was
Yeah.
his view on educating women?
He was actually for it. believed educated women would understand their lovers better, leading to less blind, happier love.
Interesting. He didn't like the Paris scene, though.
No, he felt the focus on fashion and cliché phrases stifled women's real graces. He wanted women to have interesting ideas which books could give them.
And women's delicacy. He had a theory about that.
Yeah, that it came from their vulnerable position, needing to navigate society carefully. He also thought lack of meaningful work held women back.
Well, passion could drive any work.
Right. He really slams the girls' education of his day, though.
Saying it taught useless things, hid reality.
Exactly, leading to shock and mistrust in marriage. He argued you should talk about love with girls because they know about it anyway.
But then didn't he also suggest less education could be better in some ways?
It's a bit contradictory, yeah.
Yeah.
He muses that maybe this explains why he thought Italian and Spanish women were, quote, better in love. It's complex.
He worried about lost potential, too. Female geniuses.
Definitely. Laments how education limits girls, though he points to women who succeeded despite it.
And the communication gap between husbands and wives.
He saw that as a big problem, rooted in educational differences. He imagined a wife could be a fantastic advisor if she could think freely.
What about familiarity? Can too much closeness be bad for love?
He thought so. It could destroy the crystallization, like his example of the girl whose crush faded when she got closer. The mystery evaporated.
Sensory things matter too, right? Like Twilight in Italy.
Oh yeah, sounds, sights, church bells, landscapes, intensifying tenderness, melancholy.
He also reflects on hidden greatness.
That many great souls exist but go unnoticed. And he describes that first-hand clasp with incredible intensity.
Comparing it to the joy of power.
Yes, a really striking comparison, and that generalization. Strength to the north, wit to the south.
Provocative. He also takes on that saying about heroes and valets.
Right, arguing true heroism can stand up to scrutiny. He's always contrasting things, worldliness versus puritanism, different national traits.
And questioning why there aren't more female geniuses in the middle class.
Yeah, probing societal structures. He believed experiencing others' influence was vital for developing character.
What about ancient Rome? He notes the lack of women's love letters.
Suggesting a different cultural expression. And he preferred prose over poetry for capturing love's nuances.
He wasn't too impressed with the Roman poets' mistresses, was he?
No, saw them as often coquettish, maybe venal, contrasting them with later figures like Heloise, who he saw as having more sublime feelings.
He had this nostalgic wish, too.
To see Venice in 1760 imagined it as a peak time for happiness.
He keeps comparing nationalities. English melancholy versus Parisian lightness.
Yeah, even among the less well-off. And Paris's short attention span always focused on the now.
And he includes that personal story about his correspondence with Klopstock.
Right, realizing love slowly, mistaking it for friendship at first. It adds a very personal layer.
He gets quite dramatic, too, talking about betrayal and revenge.
Referencing literary figures like Callista, even giving that wild advice about escaping and changing identity after a bad betrayal.
Probably not literal advice, hopefully.
One would hope.
Yeah.
He also observes that Italians talk less about love directly, more about friendship or approach.
Interesting nuance, and the distinction between pleasure from pain ending versus other joys.
Yeah, like winning the lottery is different from, say, relief. But love, he says, is unique. It mints the coin to pay its own expenses.
Creates its own value.
Essentially. He also hated compliments to young girls focused only on looks. Saw it as building harmful vanity.
He reflects on medieval virtue versus modern honor.
Always drawing on memoirs, personal accounts for his ideas. He wasn't just theorizing in a vacuum.
That story about the German court scandal
shows the rigid social rules back then. And his thoughts on Americans.
Too much reason may be hindering romance.
That was his take. And the different ways French widows and widowers reacted to loss. He admired the U.S. government, but not always the society.
Italian girls relying on instinct, not novels.
Yeah, contrasting with, say, German geniuses worrying about money versus fools obsessed with it. He even mentions cutting a chapter on prudery.
Circling back to themes like familiarity killing crystallization.
Great souls going unnoticed, the power of that first touch. And Roman love via poets seeming different from later ideals.
And finally, those courts of love.
Fascinating, right? Noble ladies in Gascony and Provence ruling on love dilemmas based on a code of love.
Debating if you can love two people or if married people can truly love.
Exactly. Real historical courts making judgments on these things. He also valued famous love letters, the Portuguese nun, Heloise, Mirabeau, as key texts for understanding passion.
And he's careful with his sources, footnotes, acknowledging friends like Foriel for
Yeah,
stories.
embedding quotes from others, referencing works like Montesquieu. It's quite layered.
So, wrapping up this deep dive into Stendhal's On Love, what are the big takeaways?
Well, it definitely loves complexity, right? The idea of crystallization is huge. How temperament, culture, society all shape it. It's this constant dance between thought, feeling, expectation.
It's a really unique perspective, even now. Makes you think about love in ways you might not otherwise.
Absolutely. It challenges you to see the diversity of love, all the hidden factors influencing it.
Okay, so here's a final thought for everyone listening, building on Stendhal.
Hmm.
Given his focus on crystallization and that need for imagination, maybe even solitude, how is our super connected, always on digital world changing things?
Are we losing the space for that slow, imaginative buildup? Or is crystallization just happening differently now, maybe online in new ways?
Exactly. Are new forms emerging in this digital age? Something to definitely mull over.
A very Stendhal-esque question to end on. Thanks for joining us on this exploration.